Hello and welcome to the Dorothy Clive Gardener's Question Time. If I can introduce the panel that we've got today, we have Zdenek, who's our head gardener here, obviously a hero, bit of a superstar on Radio Stoke and Radio Shropshire. We have Ross, who's from Goldston Hall and one of our trustees, so we're very grateful for his support. And Indy from Tendershoots, who I'm sure a lot of you will know, and is a technical whiz, which is very handy here. So thank you to our audience and thank you for coming to ask some questions. Maybe we could start with an audience question. Okay, so this one is a box caterpillar moth, possibly, or it could be box blight. So box caterpillars, who would like to attack the question?
I'll give this one a stab. I think you've got two issues. One is, what do you want to do with the box plants? And number two is, what do you want to do about the caterpillars? So, will the box plants recover? Well, in all likelihood, they might well do. Box is quite a tough. In fact, I spent an enormous amount of time yesterday in my own garden trying to actually dig out some box. A box hedge that had been planted on top of a wall at the back of my kitchen window. The roots are incredibly tough. The plants are incredibly tough, and they will regenerate quite well. Having said that, both box blight and box caterpillars will reduce that capacity of them to regenerate progressively over time. So the question you face is, what do you want to do about box caterpillar? If you've had box caterpillar once, if it's the first time you've had box caterpillar, you're likely to get it again. So there are two issues, and there's the organic way of controlling box caterpillar, or any caterpillar, and there's an inorganic way of controlling. There's plenty of stuff on the market that will kill caterpillars, and that is one avenue to go down. The other issue is, do you really want to grow box again, or do you want to seek out an alternative? I mean, you know, you're saying you've got them in a pot. I presume they're sort of cut and shaped and so on. So it's to maybe seek out an alternative. One that I'd recommend is Quercus ilex, the holly-leaved oak, which makes lovely, nice sort of shape, but topiary shape. But so really, it is what you want to do about the likelihood that you're going to get the caterpillar again. Do you want to set up a sort of spraying regime, an insecticidal regime, or really cut your losses and try something else, which is what I would recommend. I mean, box blight, we have box blight at Goldston, have it at Dorothy Clive. There's virtually nowhere that's probably free of box blight, which is a fungal problem, and you compound that with box caterpillar. And I would say that, you know, we always grew box as the sort of go-to plant for a lot of situations, and I think we've just got to realize that may change now because of these two. Well, there's pest and disease. Interestingly, when it comes to box blight, I went to a garden last weekend on the North Wales coast, and the owner there is a member of the Boxwood and Topiary Society, and a lot of his free-form boxes, so just leaves them to grow and assume their natural shape, remain free of box blight, but they won't necessarily remain free of box caterpillar. So I think you've got to decide how much you want to persist with a problem that may just reoccur and reoccur, and it might be worth just cutting your losses and having a go at something else.
Yeah.
But I'm open to any other suggestions.
No, I'd be inclined to agree. Luckily, here at Dorothy Clive, we haven't got a lot of box. We've literally got one bush of it, and it's the more robust variety with big leaves. And everywhere I go these days, Trentham, you know, places like this where there are parterres and formal box hedging, and to a degree, larger or smaller, they will always have this problem. Box blight is here to stay. It's not going to go away. It's fighting that somewhat of a losing battle, really, unless you want to be throwing tons of chemicals on that, which I find personally unsustainable, then you may, as Ross says, your losses and use something that is not sustainable.
So get rid of them now, but we can give them a chance, because we've got other box feeds in containers and they're all right at the moment, so. Get rid of them before they start the cycle again.
I would, yeah, put them on a bonfire now.
Brutal.
As you can tell, I like subtlety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just when you
That's with
try
intent.
these things in garden centres and you think, oh,
Yes, yeah, they're enormously expensive. When you see them in a garden centre, they always look perfect because they are, and because they've been mollycoddled to within an inch of their life. They've been sort of drenched with everything to feed them and keep them healthy and make them look nice and shiny and glossy and everything. And you know, years and years ago, you would have had no problem putting box in most situations, containers, you know, formal situations. I say when grown informally, they make quite interesting looking plants, really. But I think, you know, we are living in a sort of fairly fast changing world, and these problems aren't going to go away. So I think you have to consider where you want to invest your time in your next purchase. And I would go for an alternative. I like Quicks and Ilex, as I've said, but there are other things that there are other things that you can use. Pittosporum, yeah, makes a lovely, and especially in a container as well. You know,
Ilex crenata,
yeah.
but a bit more
It's
tender.
on the slow side.
Yes. The other thing with Ilex crenata I find is just tend to go a little bit bald at the bottom when you're trying to keep it into the as a low hedge. But there are other things that you can use to fulfill that sort of same role. So I would say the opportunity is there just to try something new.
I think I guess the only thing is that you've had them for quite a long time, haven't you? So you've invested a lot of. There was on Gardener's World, Chris Beardshaw. He had a whole row of box hedging that suffered quite badly, and he knocked his back down completely, got rid of all of the foliage, spent a huge amount of time, and it's not the kind of time I'd probably invest in it, but he did manage to bring it back by giving it a good seaweed feed and clearing all the debris. But in terms of if you wanted to try some products, because obviously you spent so much time looking after it, you may want to give it a go to see if you can revive it, but it'll be a never-ending battle, I think, from now on. So if you did want to try any of the products, you'd want something that's pyrethrum based. That's something that is, well, it depends whether you say it's organic or not, and it's derived from chrysanthemums, I think. So that's something, but just make sure you actually get it to the caterpillars, because obviously they'll have the webbing, so you need to make sure you penetrate that. If you want to try any of the sort of biological products, there is something called Zentari, and that starts with a ZX. It's one of these sort of biological, what do they call them? Yeah, bacteria. But I don't think it's cheap. But because obviously you've got quite established plants, it might be worth giving that a try. And that's like a bacteria that once the caterpillars ingest them, then it kills them off. So that's something you could potentially try. I mean, in terms of the box blight itself, there are a couple of products now that are listed as box blight preventers, and one is called Top Buxus. So you might want to look out for that. And Fungus Fight has also now been listed as a box preventer. But I was just going to say, in terms of the other varieties, the big leaf one that Zdenek mentioned, is that Hansworthiensis?
Macrophylla.
Macrophylla, yeah. So that might be an alternative to try. And also it's RHS Wisley. They've got a trial on box alternatives. So they did try quite a number of those ones that have been mentioned as well. And there's a couple that did sort of come out quite useful. There's one called the Euonymus Japonicus Gene Hughes, which was a really good one to try. And then the other was Linicera nitida.
Except that needs pruning every 3 weeks.
Yeah. Very fast
Pruning.
very fast grower. But yeah, it's a good option.
Yeah.
But that will become your life's work.
We have those here that they do make a nice topiary, but you have to be on it because they go so fast. We have those on the laburnum edge, laburnum arch even. And Catherine has to be there in the season. Catherine is our hedge clipping lady. When there is a hedge that needs to be clipped, Catherine chooses to do that.
I do.
It's one of her favourite jobs.
Yes.
But yeah, that needs to be done very, very frequently. Otherwise, it just fuzzes up almost the minute you've left it. So yeah.
I do have to confess, I've spent part of my life obsessing about box hedges. And I am the person that's been seen out with the spirit level. So I have been utterly, good 90-degree corners, all of that. And I have box hedge at home, and I have made box balls grown from cuttings. So I have invested in my box hedging, and I am now toying with the idea of taking it out because I have box blight, and I don't like spraying, but unless I spray probably 3 weekly, the box blight is back, and it is spreading from one bit to another. And it's fairly heartbreaking because it's the winter structure to the garden. But I have to say, the box blight might win. It would be a big bonfire, but it might have got the better of me.
Sorry, if I can just jump in. We do have one policy here in Dorothy Park in the garden. If it looks bad, it doesn't do. I give it
Absolutely.
one more
Yeah.
chance. After that year, off with its head.
Yeah.
If it doesn't bring pleasure,
It has to bring joy. If
I'm
it's
just
bringing
concerned,
trouble,
I think probably what you said, get rid of them now before the caterpillars become active, because we've got other boxes in.
they could already be in
Yeah.
there. I have to warn you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've really,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I keep thinking that about these box balls, and they are sort of a beautiful spherical shape. And then you get a bald spot on one corner, and so it is disappointing, but it is spreading. It is out of control. Sorry about that. That was a miserable first question. I think we have to go for something more positive this time. So I've had one emailed in, and I've had a couple of bulb questions. Somebody who's seen some very early daffs flowering, and they want to know what they are and how they go for the very early daffs and maybe some later ones to extend the season.
Okay, so I'll take this. So we do have a winter garden here at Clive, and also an array of bulbs throughout. So in terms of that are very early, there is the Narcissus, pseudo Narcissus, which is a native species, which is actually very dainty. I must admit that myself, I'm not a huge fan of that. I find them quite loud, but pseudo Narcissus is really, really pretty. It's quite short, and the yellow is very soft. It's almost like a greeny yellow, and it's one of the first ones to flower. It's in fact in full flower now. February Gold, that's another one. Rip Van Winkle, if you want something that is a little bit more unusual, they look like little pom-pom dahlias. Sorry, cactus dahlias even. And Tete-a-Tete is also quite early. That's the really, really short one, which is very, very sweet, especially from mice and the shrubs. So those would be my picks.
Yes, you can't beat a good Lenten lily, the pseudo Narcissus. A. Houseman, which I won't quote, wrote a lovely poem about Lenten lilies, but we have Tete-a-Tete out in the garden now. It's the one daffodil that never lives up to its name, because all the flowers, instead of pointing towards each other, look away from each other. So I think it should change its name to Narcissus Cold Shoulder.
Yeah, or fallen out.
Yes, yeah. Well, Narcissus got the hump. That would be quite a nice one.
Yeah. So what would you recommend for the extended season?
Okay, so maybe a mid-season, just one that we've got on our magnolia board, which I love, is Thalia. So Thalia is medium height Narcissus, maybe about 2 foot. It's multi-flowered, so there's more flowers on the first stem, and they are pure crystal white. Almost translucent quality to that. Very, very good to that. And perhaps the end of the season is the pheasant eye. So the pheasant eyes, they flower sometimes as late as May and June, and also on top of that, they are actually scented. So beautiful in more informal bits of woodlands, grass. They are really like
Poeticus flora plana is a nice double version.
Yeah, Poeticus recurvus.
Yeah.
That's the pheasant eye.
It does make all those ones with the smaller cups are quite nice, aren't they? Quite dainty, quite sweet, and they don't pull the head over too much.
Yeah. Super. Thank you.
I bought a really nice one 2 years ago called Altruist.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's come across that one. It's a lovely salmony sort of peachy colour, so it's not your traditional yellow. And with all these kinds of bulbs, I always try to see them in the flesh before I buy them. Well, with any plant, because the photos, you're never sure if it's really going to come out like the photo. And when it bloomed, I was just absolutely stunned. The colour of it is just fantastic. So that's definitely one I'd recommend. And a really early one that I'm struggling to get hold of. So if anybody's got it, I'd be appreciative. It's called Cedric Morris.
All right.
I don't know if anybody's got that. It's
But he's an Irishman.
Irishman,
Yeah, from
Yeah.
Norfolk.
yeah, and it was I think it was found in something to do with Beth Chatto. I can't quite remember, but that is the earliest daffodil, and it is very expensive. I have had a look on eBay, and they are they're not cheap. And then the other one, I don't know if anybody mentioned this, Rhineville's Early Sensation. Did you mention that?
No.
Yeah, Rhineville's Early Sensation. That's quite commonly available. So that's a good one. And for a little bit later, Pheasant Eye. That's a really nice one
Yeah.
too.
Super. Thank you all very much. I think that's covered the daffodils for about 6 months. So do we have another question from the floor? Joan is asking about a 12-inch high lemon tree, which is on a trellis, and Joan feels it needs repotting.
So we grow quite a lot of citrus here in Clive, so I can give you some guidelines for this. It looks like from the side of the plant that it will appreciate repotting. It will appreciate a little bit more than around the repot. In terms of what compost to use, don't worry too much about ericaceous or non-ericaceous. Anything around it will do the trick. I was put it in John Innes because that's a more long-term solution. There are plants that will stay in those pots for the rest of their life. They can be planted outside, so soil-based compost is probably better. John Innes number 2, I would go, because they look like a young plant. Citrus are hungry plants, so you would even get away with 3. So the grades of John Innes are graded as to how many nutrients there are in it. So 2 or 3 is the medium and high amount. In terms of untangling it from the trellis, you will probably have to do that to an extent, and they will take to pruning. You can prune citrus really quite easily, just down to about, I would untangle it, see what it looks like, and then I would perhaps prune it back, not too severely though, maybe up to about a third, maximum of a third of the overall size of the bush. Citrus store a lot of the energy of the plant in their leaves. So if you got rid of those leaves, you are cutting the nutrients that the plants need. It takes them a long time to get them in there, so they will not like you for that. But if you untangle it from the trellis, then maybe prune them to about with the view of creating an open side bush. So mind where those buds are pointing, and in time it will issue. In terms of general care, you can summer it outside. In fact, I would recommend summering citrus outside. So after the weather warms up in June, wipe it out in a nice sunny spot, little bit of shelter, keep it watered, keep it fed. Citrus have to be fed all year round with 2 modalities of food. So one is higher in nitrogen, which is the summer food, and the other one will be higher in potash, which is the winter food, and you should be okay. Also, they are susceptible to heavy pest known to man, unfortunately.
More good news.
Keep an eye on that, and cut those critters off, and you should be okay. Then, as the temperatures cool down in the autumn, bring it back in. One thing that I should expand on the watering, it's a bit of a funny one. It likes to dry out almost completely, and then it wants to be drenched almost completely. So it likes that wet, dry cycle. It doesn't like little and often. Maybe in the winter, even in the winter when things are slower, you are not watering quite as much. The plant will tell you if it's upset. That's how we all know to water it. The leaves will start sagging, but ideally we don't want to get it to this stage. So you'll just be watering less, but again, you'll be drenching, letting the excess water drain, and then waiting.
And what about in terms of support?
So in terms of support of that lemon tree, I don't think it will, it depends on what it is, but generally they should be able to hold themselves. I suspect that that support was there because the fruit was developing on it and it's quite heavy, so would have weighed it down. And in your care, I assure you, you won't get that many.
Oh dear.
These again, just like the box plants, you know, that we buy, that's the previous question. These were mollycoddles within an inch of their life. They will have been manipulated, you know, probably even on a hormonal level. And every need was catered to so that they would produce these masses of lemons so that they would be extremely saleable. So it's quite unlikely that you would achieve in your home conditions that sort of level of exuberance, should we say. But you know, that's just how the cookie crumbles, and I'm sure you will get you'll get flowers and you'll get lemons. For me, don't really care about the lemons so much. I love the flowers and I love the scent of them. It's absolutely one of the most delicious stuff.
Is it okay to prune it now?
You can prune them almost any time, but I would recommend if you need to do it now is a good time because things are kind of starting to wake up. You know, the light levels are rising, things are on the up. And pruning evergreen things is always best done in the up dynamic. So now is a good time.
Super. If I can just say, I think they're available in garden centres in terms of citrus summer feed, citrus winter feed, citrus compost, and because they're quite a trendy thing, it's easier to get it right. I think. Does anybody want to add citrus care?
I wasn't going to say anything about it. Well, I was going to ask a Zdenek question about it. So when what I often recommend with young plants that fruit of any type, whether it's citrus or
I know you're going to say
is there is a cost and a benefit to having the fruit. So would this lady be as well if she gets a good crop of lemons? Would she be better sacrificing them for a year or so to get her plant more established?
I can't but agree with that. Yeah. It goes, as Ross rightly pointed out, it goes with any young plant. So be it a magnolia or be it whatever, it wants to flower and it's very, very young, we should really be focusing more on establishing the framework and making it grow, become robust. Then, yeah. But you are allowed one lemon. Don't take a much, don't take all.
I was going to say one lemon, one gin and tonic. Thank you. India, are you happy that we've covered it?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is one thing I've suffered with in the past is red spider mite, which is a right pain. So what I was going to say is I would prefer to untangle it as soon as possible, so you've got a greater visibility of the entire plant, and you've got So from that regard, I would definitely take it off its stand so you can keep an eye on it a bit more.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Does that answer your question in full? Wonderful. So if I can now ask each of the panel members for a topical job for this week.
I'll tell you what I was about to do, and I forgot to do it last year, was to move my crocuses, because they've been in for a few years and they do spread, don't they, from the bulb. And now I've got these big, huge clumps that are just throttling each other. So I always try to wait until the foliage has died back, but then by that point, I've forgotten where they are.
The job.
Yeah, and when I remember the job last year, I thought, let me just try and find them. And I ended up digging the entire lawn up to try and find them, and I still didn't find them. So my top tip for today is go out with some labels and label anything that you want to move around. That's something I'm definitely going to be doing.
Fabulous.
So a couple of things that I've been doing recently in the garden at Goldston. Keep an eye on your potatoes that are chitting, especially the first earlies. Don't let them turn into triffids before you're ready to plant them in the ground. You know, if they're in somewhere, take them out somewhere cooler. Give the chits a bit of light, and that will harden them off for when you're planting. The other thing you can look to be doing it now is if you've sown things like aubergines, tomatoes, chilies on in a sort of on a heat bench and you've had them covered over, is to take any sort of, even if they're, you know, clear plastic covers, take them off, make sure they're getting good light so they're not getting too drawn. And you can, you know, if they're at the stage where you can start pricking some out and potting them on, then I'd be doing that now. And the other thing is have a look at your lawns, and if your lawns have got mossy over the winter, then you can apply some iron now, something like 7% iron applied as a drench will knock the moss back. And then come sort of April time, when the grass is actually starting to grow more vigorously, you can look to scarify, and then you can look to dilute the amount of moss killer that you're using and increase the amount of fertilizer to give you a nice healthy lawn to go on with.
Thank you. Busy times.
Busy times indeed. Been just playing in my head what is the most important thing that we're doing, but there is a few. Well, I'm Captain Mulch here in Dorothy, Clive. I love mulching, and it is such a good practice. And we are running out of time now because things are starting to push through, bulbs and, you know, other things. So all the herbaceous is waking up. So we are getting to the tail end of the window of being able to mulch, because then it's like tipped and dance, all of the things that are pushing through. So maybe spread some mulch on your borders, it will do them good. We are finishing that in Dorothy Clive. Also, another thing that we are doing, much to our dismay, but every now and then it needs to be done, we are digging out celandine. So celandine is this awful weed that actually, if left, flowers pretty, but it is very pretty in a woodland and not so pretty in an ornamental border. So we are taking those out, which is an awful job. But you know, this is just about the last time we can do it before they blow up, and then the job becomes exponentially harder. And if you haven't done so, then again, the window of pruning that is supposed to be done in the winter is closing. So perhaps prune your roses and fruit trees and all the other things if you haven't done so already.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yes, we'll have picked that up. It's a Daphne in wet soil. Will it live? Or is there another way of doing it?
Well, I don't think that Daphnes will appreciate having their feet wet over the winter. We grow Daphnes here in Dorothy Clive, a few different ones. The one that stands out for us is Jacqueline Fossil. It is just about the most popular plant in the garden right now because of the scent that it produces. Unfortunately, it is quite a big one. So ultimately, it will grow quite big. I can't see a problem with growing a Daphne in a pot, but Jacqueline Fossil will ultimately end up in a very big pot. Incrementally, it will have to be potted on. Also, they have one snag: all Daphnes absolutely resent root disturbance. It's one of the things that they do not really take to very lightly. So maybe Mezereon would be a better choice. So that's more of a compact plant. Is it Heavenly Fragrance or
Eternal Fragrance?
Eternal Fragrance. That's a nice short one, which ultimately actually will grow into quite a tall, maybe 3-4 foot kind of rounded bush, evergreen, small leaves, very compact, very pretty, and it produces these small pink flowers actually sporadically throughout the year. So that is a good one. That probably is my best pick for a pot, because they're also, luckily, they're also quite slow. So, you know, it's not gonna demand being repotted very soon.
What sort of soil?
I would say that they are not fussy as far as it's reasonable soil. So again, because it will probably spend its life in the pot, because you are not planning on moving it into your wet garden. So maybe something solid based.
So can I just ask, what was the reason that you mentioned Daphne? Have you seen one somewhere, or is somebody mentioned it linked to you, or?
Yes, in the quarry.
Quarry. Okay. Because I love scented flowers. That's mostly what I grow. And when I first got into gardening, I made the mistake of buying anything that said fragrant on it. you know, so I bought the Eternal Fragrance, I bought the Daphne, I bought, you know, quite a few of them. And I realized actually there is a difference in the types of scents. So again, this is probably subjective for some people, but the Daphne, Jacqueline Postel is just insatiable. The scent is fantastic. The Eternal Fragrance, I find it quite sort of a tinny scent, like a bit like what are those things that come out in the Christmas blue,
Saffron
no, the blue things, you pop the bulbs, hyacinths. Yeah. So I don't really like the scent of hyacinths, and it's the same with the Eternal Fragrance. But it is,
So
but
it's quite weak, isn't it?
Much weaker than
Much
Yeah.
weaker.
Jacqueline
I mean,
Postel.
we haven't comparing here to Jacqueline Possible, who's obviously head and shoulders.
Yeah.
above
Yeah.
everything.
but it is a great grower. It's you know, very robust and very strong. So if you want something that looks good, then that would do well. But the Jacqueline Postel is fantastic. I have got Daphne Jacqueline Postel in a pot. I bought two because after I realised, you know, what she was, I thought, right, I've got to have a couple. One of them died, didn't survive. The other one is doing really, really well. So it's a 50-50 ratio for me. And it did cost me a fortune, but it is definitely fantastic. The other one I'd probably recommend is Daphne Odora, Oreo Marginata. Bit of a mouthful, but that's a slightly hardier one, and it's got sort of variegated rim around the edge of the foliage. That one's much shorter. That's like a shrubby variety, so you won't really need to prune that one too much, and that one doesn't like being pruned at all, to be honest. But Jacqueline Postel, I've heard people say it doesn't like being pruned, and I've heard other people say they hack it back all the time and they have no issues whatsoever. So I think it's one of those things where you can just take a chance on it. And I certainly have got mine in a pot and it's doing well. I haven't had a chance to prune it yet because she's still quite small, but I do snip off a flower head every couple of days in from going to the office. So it is fantastic.
I think there's another cultivar called Gurkha of the Baloo, which is also very nice. But I think there's a more general point that Zdenik's touched on that you raised, which is about the sort of long-term life of things in containers and what to put them in. My recommendation would always be to go for a loam-based compost, go for a John Innes compost if you're going to keep anything in a container for a long period of time. There's two real avenues containers in terms of compost. So there are the John Innes or loam-based types, which have a soil base to them, and I find them more stable in the pot. So composts which have another base, such as peat, for example, or other alternatives that are available, they tend to still be quite biologically active. So you'll often find that either the volume of compost in the pot will diminish quite quickly, or you can overfeed something in a pot initially. You know, some of these non-soil based composts are really quite rich, and what you want is to sort of almost mimic the fact that the plant is in the ground. So a loam based compost is far more sort of stable long term for anything that's going to live in a pot.
Perhaps one drawback with that, if it gets the size of a pot that is, you know, anything more than this, then because they are soil based, the weight is phenomenal, and you will probably need some help moving it around, or a sack or something like that. So it's a bit of a pain on that side, but long term, absolutely, 100% soil based is the way to go.
One other thing you could potentially do is if you're worried about doing it in the pot and keeping it watered, is actually just get a large pot, take off the bottom of it and sink the pot in the ground, and then plant the Daphne into that. So it's not constantly in wet ground. So it's just, you know, lifted up above the ground. That's something I've done with a few of my plants. That works quite well. And if you do want a Daphne, they are very hard to get hold of. And it took me a long time to find them in this particular nursery. But last week, a couple popped up on eBay. Because I always make sure I've got that on my searches just in case anything pops up. So there's about 3 on eBay that have come up. So it might be worth having a look on there.
But there are alternatives. You know, if you're looking for something winter flowering and scented that would stand a wetter soil with more chance than the Daphne, and some of the viburnums, for example, are a little bit less sensitive. But if you mound plant to leave the top sort of few centimeters of the root ball slightly proud of the soil level and mound up to it, that'll just help help with the waterlogging issue.
But I have to say, and I don't like to interrupt, but I think a lot of them die. So if you really want a Daphne, I think you need to buy 2 or 3 and cross your fingers, because they do tend to peg out quite young. But if you get it to a certain stage, I think it'll live.
They are very flamboyant, and as many flamboyant people, they're also sometimes just very fickle.
Yeah. So, but fabulous. My all-time favourite, I think, really. I've had a text question in, which I think might be for Zdenek, but others can join in. What are the pale blue flowers just starting to flower in the Dorothy Clive winter garden?
So I'm assuming that can only be one thing.
I think so.
That
yes.
is the Scylla, the squill.
Mm.
Scylla mischenkoana. I found that very easy to pronounce because I'm Eastern European.
And the rest of us.
The British
Fuck it.
struggle. It's the Scylla with an unpronounceable name. And it is a super easy bulb. You can't go wrong with it. I never see it in people's gardens. I don't understand why, because it is 10 to a penny. And they are extremely undemanding. They will take a little bit of shade, prefer full sun, but a little bit of shade is absolutely fine. The only thing that they demand is drainage. So they do not like to sit in water. They also have a slight scent to them, and they look extremely good en masse. So if you can plant a big swathe of them, then they will look stunning, like they do right on the nose of the entrance to the winter garden, backed up by snowdrops behind them. And it is a very, very sweet bulb. Yeah, very, very sweet.
Well,
Very, very cheap.
cheap
Super
as chips. And we do see a lot of people standing, pointing and wondering what they are.
Yeah.
It's just.
There's a very faint, quite high note smell with
Mm.
them also. Very, very faint and delicate floral scent to them. So if you've got a mass of them, you'll be able to appreciate it as a nice warm day like we've been having of late.
That's absolutely beautiful. So would you like to recommend a bulb that you think should be in the garden at any time of year, really? Because they're so good between plants, you know, and these come up before our hostas.
I had Camassias in the garden, but I got rid of them all.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Ooh, that's contentious.
Both Russ and I love Camassia.
I love Camassias.
Well, I thought I did. And then it's kind of like when you move in with somebody, you realise actually it wasn't quite what you quite what you expected. So I got rid of them all, gave them away to the garden club, because the foliage comes up, it just takes over everything. I mean, it's not a big garden. I've only got a small garden, so I guess obviously if you're somewhere like Dorothy Clive, then you can create an area for it. But it just smothered everything I had around it, and the foliage comes up very early, and it just takes over, and they spread really quickly. I had them on something which I call the volcano in the garden, which is just a big mound, rockery area. So I got rid of all of them, and I found something which is millions of times better, and it's called Ornithogalum magnum.
Oh right.
And it's a fantastic little bulb. I think it's a little bit tender, but it's been all right for me. In fact, I even tested planting one on top of the soil, and it's come through absolutely fine. So as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty robust. But basically, it'll send up. It will have some foliage, but it's not over sort of bearing on anything else. And it sends up these tall flower stems, and the flowers just pop open as it just goes up and up and up. And it's a very elegant Camassia, if I can describe it in that way. So as Camassia flowers, they just sort of all get lost within each other, whereas the Magnum is just it's just beautiful. It's definitely worth going. White, yeah, stunning.
Some of the white Camassias I think are a bit mucky, a bit grey. And I love the Ornithogalum nutans, which have got like a green edge to the white flower.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. Oh, Ross.
My tip would be, well, the one bulb that I always would like to get rid of, but never quite manage, is the double form of Galanthus nivalis. Now, I love snowdrops. I love single snowdrops. I'm not a galanthophile. You will never see me on my knees. Snowdrops are meant to be seen en masse from a standing position, as far as I'm concerned. But Galanthus nivalis always looks like the pigeons have been sat on a branch above. to me. So it's not one that's my favourite, but one I always like to have in the garden is Fritillaria melagris, denizen of damper spots. Will go in grassland, will go on the trees, and has, as you know, these lovely nodding checkerboard heads. And in fact, the Fritillaria family is really quite interesting because there's a Fritillaria for almost every position in the garden. You've got some better drained soil, you know, the Crown Imperials are always very, very nice, very eye-catching, but also Fritillaria persica, absolutely lovely. Nice thing to have in a container with a bit of grit around it, and then put it in a well-drained sunny spot in the garden. But one bulb I wouldn't be without is Fritillaria melagris, and you know, cheap as chips. And they once they're happy, they will spread quite sedately, but quite you know, they won't interfere with anything else. But a lovely thing to see.
I think they're beautiful.
Yeah.
I did want to plant 4,000 Fritillaria melagris. It was epic. But they did look beautiful when they came up,
They're fantastic.
which was lovely. Do we have any more questions from the floor? No? That's okay. I've got some more on email. So people want to know what they should be doing and whether they should be touching the lawn or not. So sorry, Zdenek, I know you don't like lawns or lawn work.
It's okay. I mean, it's part of the parcel, but we are not obsessed by lawns here. Like we mow them religiously, but we also edge them. And if there is a patch of daisy in it, then so be it. Right? That's kind of my approach. So I also appreciate a nice, neat lawn. So whenever I go to gardens such as Wisley or Harlow Carr, and I see that beautiful lawns that are cut as if, you know, like by a laser beam, then I have lawn envy. But that also, you know, you would need an extra member of staff really to look after all of it. So nevertheless, good lawn binds everything together in your garden, and looking after it is important. And the most important thing is, of course, to mow it when it's growing. And it is growing because it's been mild. So over the winter, also what happens in a lawn, it starts growing unevenly because bits of the lawn grow better than other bits. And then it starts looking a little tiny bit maybe wavy and untidy. And that is the time to get the mower out on it. Maybe raise the cup a bit, maybe don't have it quite as hard as you would in the summer. And just tidy it up really. That's all you need to do for now, to be perfectly honest. And keep the edges of the borders sharp. And yeah, that's all I would do really in the context of Dorothy Clive. But by the way, when I have lawns, this is just to describe how incredibly unenthused I am by lawns. When we have the module of lawns, when many months ago I was doing my qualifications, I nearly failed my qualification because I just couldn't whip up myself to open the books and read about how many blades of grass is on this and on that, and you know, how is it all different. I just couldn't muster the you know, the energy to do that. So I'm happy to pass this over to Ross. You know, is there anything at the moment apart from safe feeding and
Yeah, so I think, you know, as I said before, you could apply an iron solution now to kick the moths into touch. The other thing is, like everybody, where you've been going around the garden over the winter time, you'll have certain pinch points, bare patches that get sort of highly trafficked, or perhaps somewhere you know, on the north side of a hedge or water where the grass is sort of struggling a little bit. So do a bit of research and maybe just think about oversowing with a different seed mixture. So for highly trafficked areas, you want something with a bit more ryegrass in it to make it more hard wearing. But no, I think Zdenek's right. You can love your lawn to as much of an extent as you wish to. Gardens, you know, gardens are as much of the success of a garden is as much about how one area transitions to another. So, and lawns can be quite important in that they don't all have to be a bowling green, but you know, generally green and tidy is the rule of thumb. So that's what I would do. Pick the moss into touch. Because when eventually we get a heat wave and it does turn dry, that moss will then shrivel up and go brown, and everybody will say, well, what can I do? Well, the time to act is now. But also just have a look at some of the places where you're getting more wear and tear, for example, and maybe oversow with a different mixture.
Thank you very much. Did you want to add anything, Linda? We have 2 minutes to go.
Well, I'm not a big fan of lawns myself either, to
No?
be honest.
Okay, makes all of us.
I'd get rid of it all and plants if I could. I was just going to add one other thing. In terms of the alternative to the iron, because it does turn the moss black, doesn't it? Apparently, because I don't do any of that. But there's something that has come out fairly, I guess, it's newish, which is a bacteria-based product. I don't know if you've tried any of that. We have to mention brand names.
Go for it. We're not the BBC.
Just like check. There's one called Mobacter, which is, I don't know if you've come across that at all. But it's again, obviously they're trying to come up with lots of other products these days instead of having to use chemicals. So Mobacter is like a bacteria, and apparently what it does is it kind of feeds the moss, but it overfeeds it, so it kills itself. And so I've not actually tried it myself, but that might be something that you want to possibly consider as an alternative. You don't want to use the traditional chemicals. So.
Thank you. So it just remains for me to say thank you all very much. Hope you've all learned something, and thank you for popping in. And the other thing I need to say, stop press, we've just had a bird in the bird box, which is on the television. So it's thrilling. We're really excited. We're waiting for the eggs. It was a little tit, bless it. We don't know what sort. But yes, so if you want to see the bird in the bird box, pop in. So thank you all very much. And I think that's another one. The next Gardener's Question Time will be the 3rd of March from 12 till 1, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we've done it, and we finished on time. Normally I go over.